So welcome everybody today. This is going to be a great session. You'll take away a lot from today. Angela is a qualified career coach. She has a degree in human resources management and also qualifications in a professional coaching capacity. She's amazing. And we actually work very closely with Angela. We offer a program through Sterning HR and Sterning Group. So if you know someone that's looking for career clarity or some extra one-on-one help with interviews or resumes or anything like that, please get in touch with us or Ange and let them know, tell them to let them know where they heard about it. I'm Emma Egan. I am the managing partner of Sterning Group and the director of Sterning HR alongside Bianca Clifton. We recruit across the human resources sphere for Sterning HR. Sterning Group recruits across engineering, finance, IT, and sales, and we have a network across Australia. We're very lucky to work with amazing people like Ange, and today Angela's really going to go through some job interview tips for you. Even the most senior people do struggle with interviews sometimes, so it's a good reminder of what you need to do next time you're going for a role, whether it's a role for a promotion with a panel interview or a brand new job altogether. And I will hand it over to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Emma, and hello everyone. Good to be here with you all today. So today we're just going to go through an hour's presentation on how to be successful at job interviews. If you've got any questions, I think is it just put them in the chat box?
Yeah, you can use the chat box down the bottom or the Q&A, whichever you prefer.
Yeah, and let us know, and Emma will just share them, and then we'll talk through them together. So let's just have a look at what we're going to cover today. So this is the main things that I'm really going to go through today: research and preparation, commonly asked interview questions, behavioural-based interview questions, which I'm sure a lot of you know about, online job interviews, because even although we're 14 months into the pandemic, I have to say I'm still experiencing a lot of my clients still having online job interviews. I actually had a person just this week, and they're at final stage. They've had 3 interviews and all of them have been online, and it's a very senior role. They've actually physically never met anyone. So it's definitely still going on. So we'll touch on that as well. And then just to sort of top it off, just some questions that you can ask at the end of your interview, just so that you're prepared for that as well. So there'll be a lot of things today that I'll talk about that you guys will already know. So hopefully, it'll just reaffirm what you do already know, and equally give you some new tips as well. So the first one, so research and preparation really is probably the most important area of a job interview. Yeah, and I know it sounds very common sense, but you'd be surprised at the people that don't do this well enough, or just try and wing it, so to speak, and hope it's all going to be okay. And I would never ever recommend that. Just recently I was working with quite a senior client actually, and he's got an interview for a big government role. He was doing very well. We were doing mock interviews. I was asking him questions, he was replying and doing very well. And then I said to him, so what do you know about this government department? And he went quite quiet, and I said, what's wrong? And he started laughing, and he said, do you know what? I've not actually researched it that much. I said, that's an absolute must, but it's, people just think you can just sort of do it off the bat, and I would never recommend doing that. So obviously with any company, get on their website, look at their About Us page, check what their values are, what's their purpose, what's important to them, what's the core of what they do really. All of that is so important, as well as knowing what they actually do, but what they're all about and why ultimately. Really, really important. So yeah, I was quite shocked when he did that, but obviously he's rectified that since his interview. And then research the company, as we've just said, but also check everyone out on LinkedIn. I think people expect that nowadays, and they'll check you out. So go on each person's profile, and also, you might find that you go back their profile and you think, oh geez, they worked at Commonwealth Bank, so did I 10 years ago. So you've got something in common as well. So it's always worth just, checking that out. And then find out what style of interview it'll be. So in other words, is it going to be pretty formal? Are you going to be meeting in a coffee shop? Are you going at the board? Who are you meeting? Again, I spoke with a senior client yesterday. She's got an interview tomorrow. I said, oh, that's fantastic. Who are you meeting? And she said, oh, I think. I said, what do you mean you think? She said, well, I'm not sure. I know I'm meeting this one person. I don't know if I'm meeting any others. I don't know if it's coffee. I don't know. You need to get all that clarified before you go for the interview. Yeah. I like to tell people the story of a client I had who was at the time a finance manager for a huge global brand. She'd approached the company directly through her own network and they were delighted to meet with her. She went there thinking she was just meeting one other person for a coffee. The person met her in the lobby and said, oh, come upstairs. She walked into her boardroom and there was 3 other people sitting there because they were so excited to meet her. They wanted other people to also meet her. Now, she was super prepared because she'd done a bit of coaching with me in advance. But, you know, the lesson for that is always over prepare. Yeah, never assume it's just going to be a chat because it might not be. Yeah. And then will the interview be online or face-to-face? And I know this sounds really silly, that last one, what is the dress code? But again, just this week, I've had 2 senior clients say, Angela, I've got an interview on a Friday and I know this company's casual. What are you aware?
Yeah.
Again, what would you say with that, Emma, if one of your candidates?
It's a tricky one because definitely if it's casual Friday and it's a casual company, you do not want to go in a suit and tie because you'll stick out like a sore thumb. Yeah, I think it's it's important to ask them. Like, and it's not a bad thing. If you're going through a recruiter, obviously they will prepare you for that. Yeah. But if you're going yourself, then there's no harm in asking.
Yeah. Definitely, yeah, good advice. But there's nothing worse than being overdressed. Equally, there's nothing worse than walking into the room and being underdressed and they're all sitting there looking, you know, very dapper and you feel a bit silly about it. So just ask, you know, never assume. Now, I had someone this week go for an interview. He went for an interview last Friday. He told me this week when he walked into the room, and this was a financial services company, small, but, you know, a tech company. He was meeting the CEO. The CEO was sitting there in quite a scruffy t-shirt, he felt, and jeans. You know, and my client had gone in there in a suit. But in a way, better to be overdressed. You can take the tie off than go in there underdressed and
I think that you've got to like one point that I was always told, and that was I've been in recruitment for 20 years now, is that you need to go dressed so that they look at you, not your clothes. You don't want them to look at your clothes. You want them to see you. So it's a good way to think about it. Someone's just asked if it's online and on a Friday, then how do we dress? Because she has an interview online tomorrow. Well, I think if it's from here up, you need to just look neat and tidy.
Yeah, I'm sitting in shorts at the moment, by the way. So, you know, I'll have like a blouse or whatever on top. But nobody sees, hopefully, down the bottom part. Yeah. So and
you've got to make sure that you feel comfortable too, because I don't think like if you don't feel comfortable in a pair of pajamas and your slippers and a nice top, then you should dress how it would make you feel comfortable and confident.
That's a really good point. Yeah, it is all a mindset thing with stuff like that as well. So, and we've got a little question later actually on a little slide later on online interviews. So just a few tips for that as well. But yeah, research and preparation, I cannot stress it enough. Never ever turn up and just try to sort of fluff through it and think, oh, well, you know, I'm being interviewed for Google. Of course I know who Google are. Do your research and find out the extra levels, but also, as I said, what's their values? What is important to them? What is their purpose with their company? So that you're including that in your answers and make it what you've always got to remember is when you get a job interview, they've seen your resume and they think you can do the job.
Okay? That's exactly right.
No one interviews someone if they don't think they can do the job. So if they think that you can do the job, it's how you perform at the interview. Yeah, and also whether they like you, to be completely honest, being blunt here, you know, if you don't make and we'll talk about this in the next slide, but if you don't make a good first impression, it can be quite hard to recover from that as well. So, you know, keep all that in mind. And I know that's hard with the online interviews as well. So for online interviews, because it is a bit more formal and a bit more stiff, then it's more important than ever to make sure that you've researched and prepared before
Absolutely.
Yeah, perfect. Is there any questions, any other questions anybody's asking, anything about that in particular?
Not on that part, no.
Good, perfect, okay. To be honest as well, I was saying this previously, Tim, and what I also find, a lot of my clients, the more senior clients especially, if they've been interviewing a lot, so they've been the interviewers, yeah, for a long time, they're very sure that they'll be good interviewees, and that isn't always the case. Yeah, so never assume like, oh, Angela, I hear it all the time. Oh, Angela, you know, gosh, I'm always interviewing. I've been here for 15 years and I've always been interviewing, and you know, I've got a big team and etc. Never assume that just because you're good at that, you'll be a good interviewee, because that doesn't.
Right.
It doesn't.
It's like recruiters doing their resumes.
Yeah,
they're not good at it.
That's a good comparison, to be honest. Yeah. So never assume that you will be. You're looking at it through a different lens because you are being interviewed. You're the interviewee. So never assume that you will be. Often when I come across clients that are being like that, when we do some mock interviews and some role plays together, they're pretty bad, actually, to be honest. So because they're just not prepared and they've just assumed that they would be great because they've done so many. And I know about behavioural interviews, Angela, you don't need to tell me about that, but it's very different when you're on that other side of the fence. Very, very different. So keep that in mind as well. Yeah. So the good old question, tell me about yourself. So I find that many job interviews will open with this question. Especially online interviews. So often, you know, it'll be, oh, hi, Angela, thanks for joining us today. So tell me a bit about yourself. It is extremely important that you've prepared for this because it sets the scene for the whole interview. It really does. Keep it to a maximum of 2 minutes. So the only way to decide if you're talking for about 2 minutes is to practice it. So I recommend practice, and you can either video yourself and time yourself or just record and time yourself. You don't necessarily need to video yourself. I find when people video themselves and play that back, they start to critique themselves and how they look.
Yeah, and think about it way too much.
Yeah. I had a guy doing that last week and it was like, geez, you know. So at least just record yourself, or at the very least time yourself. Yeah. So you want to create your little story, if you like, about why you're there, basically, and sum yourself up. As I say, this is your elevator pitch, maximum 2 minutes, and it should really be all work focused, unless they ask you about what do you like to do in your spare time. So I would primarily keep it work focused, and you almost break it into 3 parts. You open with who you are. So I've been a HR business partner for the last 10 years, primarily been working in banking, and also a few years back I worked in FMCG. Where I see my strengths and where I really feel I add value in a business are X, Y, Z. And I've recently finished up with ABC, and I'm really interested in the opportunity with you here today. So maximum 2 minutes, and it should sound authentic. And it should be your story. You should know it inside out, but it should be a conversation, not a script. Yeah, you don't want to like you're doing this and reading a little script. And the only way to do that really is practice.
Practice. Right. Do you think it really sets the tone for the interview as well?
It does. I think it does, and I think, you know, people ask me all the time, what should I say? Should I say personal things? What do they really mean by that? Well, they want to know why you're sitting in front of them and what you can offer them. You know, as I said, if you've got the interview, they think you can do it. Yeah. So they want to just hear you, see how you sound. And it's really important doing it to have good eye contact, to be smiling, to be warm, engaging, because again, they're making a lot of opinions.
Yeah, it's human.
Based on that first couple of minutes. And I always encourage people, when they put their little story together, think about what you love doing. Okay, think about over the last 5 to 7 years where you've been really happy in what you do, and where you finished the week or the day or the month and thought, I love my job. And maybe for some that doesn't happen that often. Okay, so pull out the things that are meaningful to you, because in my experience, when people answer this question with things like that, it shines through. Their whole body language changes, their demeanor changes, they smile more. So don't talk about things that you don't enjoy. Yeah, you always want
never.
No. Same on your resume. You don't flag them on your resume. You always want to talk about the things you enjoy doing, but that are relevant to the job that you're being interviewed for. So there's no point in talking about a lot of things you love doing if you know that company doesn't do it. Or there's no point in talking about you've really enjoyed being involved in an SAP implementation if they've done an SAP implementation 5 years ago and they have no intention of doing a new one. So you want to make it relevant to what they want to hear and what pricks their ears, so to speak, so that they hear you and think, oh, okay. But they're really, they're kind of testing you to just see how you sound, to see if they like you, and forming opinions very early on and very quickly, harsh as that sounds. So I'd say probably about 80% of the people that I'm working with at the minute, that would be one of the opening questions. If not that one, then tell us what you know about X, Y, Z company. Or why you want to work here. They're very early questions in an interview. Interview process. So very important not to talk for too long. Don't do longer than 2 minutes.
Less is more.
Definitely. You can always say, have I given you enough detail? Do you want to know a bit more? So under talk rather than over talk, to be honest, at any job interview. Any questions on the tell me about yourself? Is everybody sort of comfortable with what that is?
No questions.
Perfect. So looking at commonly asked interview questions, okay? And again, thinking about how you prepare for things like this. So things like, what's been your greatest achievement in your career? Again, I would encourage you to relate it to them and what they are currently doing and they're doing in their business at the moment. How would your team describe your leadership style? I had a lady recently get very confused by that and very thrown. She didn't know what to say. So thinking about things like this in advance. What do you know about whoever the company is? Okay. Again, you've done your research, and with every answer, even these answers here, I would keep them all to around about 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes. Don't talk for any longer than that. And
please don't.
And Emma's probably will have experienced this as well. I often find the more experienced people are, the more senior people are, the more that they keep talking. And I think it's just because there's so much to share and the knowledge is so deep. But you need to practice making that more succinct. Nobody wants to hear someone talk for 5 minutes when they've just asked, how would you describe your leadership style? So you really need to practice keeping your answers a lot shorter and a lot more relevant. And as I say, the only way to do that really is record yourself, hear yourself back, and think about how you can reduce the content of what you're actually saying. What would your peers say about your leadership style? Again, are really, really important. And if you're unsure, ask some of them, people that you've worked with, so that you can be honest and say, well, they'd say I'm a very collaborative leader that always, make sure that I include everyone, open door policy, all that sort of stuff. But ask people so that you're actually aware of your own self, so to speak. And it sounds genuine then, to be completely honest. You always want to sound genuine in any job interview, not like you've just rehearsed it and prepared a lot of little scripts in advance. So it is important to sound real and authentic, basically. And then why do you want to work here? That's, again, a really common question, a very basic question, but that throws a lot of people. A lot of people, oh, well, what do they want me to say? what do they want me to say for that question? What do you think, Emma, if somebody's asked that, why do you want to work here?
I definitely think you tie it back to their values, and you've got to understand, and that's where the research comes into play as well. So if you know where the organization is heading, and obviously you know where the role sits within the organization, then you can talk about the positive things they're going to do and how you can help them get there.
Yeah.
Because they want you to succeed, and you want them to succeed. So it's about tying it back to their values and the role.
Yeah,
definitely.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect. Exactly that. So why do you want to work here? Your answer should always be relevant, just like Emma said, to their values, their purpose, and be really honest. You know, I've heard very good things about what you do as a business, and looking at the website recently, what the projects and everything that you've got coming up really interests me. This is the reason why.
Yep.
Actually, 2 years ago, I did a similar thing, and you know, I really feel that I could add value there as well.
Yep.
So again, it's a question everybody should have done quite a bit of preparation for, so that you're really comfortable with it. But tying everything back into their purpose and what is important to them, basically. Don't turn it around and say something like, well, why do you work here? You know, people do that. People hate people doing that.
Yeah, they're not being interviewed.
No, I had someone, it's a while back now, that he did it every time. I'd say, why do you want to work here? And he'd be like, well, what makes you work here? Why do you want to work here?
Yeah.
They're not being interviewed, you are. I mean, it's still a conversation, and it's a two-way
thing. And I think that's a question. And when they open up the questions at the end, if it's a genuine, why do you work here? Tell me about what you love about it. Then I think that it's a good thing to ask at the end, but not turning questions around on the interviewer is not a great idea.
Totally agree. It's a great question to ask at the end as well, you know, especially if you've got on really well with them and you can see, look, this person's been here 10 years, they clearly enjoy it. It's a lovely question at the end, and we'll talk about it at the end. But to say, so what do you enjoy the most about working here? People love, and you get a real insight then into a company, into a person, I think, as well, when you ask that question. But
especially if they're going to be your manager.
Yeah, definitely. Very important. But just don't do it early in the piece that you feel like you're questioning them back. Like I had someone recently and they said, tell me about yourself. And the person's answer, what do you want to know? No, please, just don't.
Just answer.
That's super awkward. Just answer the question. Answer the question. And as I said, keep it work focused. But you can always end it by, you know, and in my spare time, I like to play around with golf now and again. Pretty proud that I've managed to get my handicap down to 15 over the years or whatever. So you can always do a little bit of that at the end if it's important for you, or especially if you're someone that's very involved in the community, not-for-profit work, definitely drop that in at the end. Yeah, definitely. But still in total, keeping it to 2 minutes or less.
Absolutely. We've had another question asking about how you pitch yourself if this is going to be your first job in Australia.
Right.
Well, from my perspective, and Angie might have a different perspective, but it's still the same, because you've still got the values, you've got the role, and you would create your pitch around what the role is and the experience that you've had and what that can bring to the role, what you can bring to the organization, and how you fit the values. That doesn't change.
No, it doesn't change wherever you are in the world, to be honest. I mean, you know, obviously, as you can tell, I'm not Australian originally. If I was just arriving here now, unemployed, looking for work, any interviews I was going for, I would be doing exactly what we're talking about now. Nothing would really be any different. I would just be relaying my experience from the UK, basically, but slotting it. Everybody, you know, as I've said previously, if you have an interview, they technically feel, looking at your resume, you could do the job. So it's then when you're there, it's how you perform, I suppose, on the day. And ultimately, whether they could see themselves working with you and the team and whatever as well. Yeah, that's a hugely, and whether you'd be the right cultural fit is a massively important thing. If it wasn't important, no one would interview. All that they would do is look at a resume, select the most technically appropriate person, and basically have a chat with them on the phone and hire them, you know? So it is seeing that you can culturally fit with what is important to them. And the only way you know that is looking at their website, looking at the about page on their company, The company page on LinkedIn is also really helpful because that's very up to the minute with most companies. So going into the company page on the LinkedIn, clicking on about, clicking on their posts and seeing what they've been posting recently as well. That's really helpful because it's very up to the minute compared to a website that's a bit more static often as well. So let's move on to behavioral based interview questions. So when I'm saying create your stories, what I mean in here is behavioral based interview questions. So what do I mean? I mean, most of you are going to know what these are, but what I mean by that is something like this. When you're asked a question like, tell me about a time you've managed a team through a challenging situation, what was this and what was the result? So what you should be, and I know a lot of you probably have interviewed people using this format, but what you've got to think when you're doing this is having stories prepared in advance. So you would be writing all this down so you're practicing it, okay? I recommend having between 3 and 5 stories. So what I mean by stories is when you've done it previously, okay? So to find out, for instance, people say to me all the time, well, how do I know what interview questions they're going to ask me? The job advert or the job description is the giveaway. So going through that advert and really reading every part of it and highlighting what you feel are the key competencies, the key skills they're looking for. So for instance, I've written on there like change management, communication, teamwork, multiple stakeholders that you've been working with. And then I would write your stories down in pieces. I recommend having 5 pieces of paper to do this, okay? Or obviously if you're doing it online. And then use the framework STAR or CARL. Now what they mean, most of you will know STAR. So STAR is situation, task, action, result. These are global frameworks, by the way. It's not something I've just made up. CARL, which is my preference, is context or challenge, action, result, and the L is actually learning. Yeah. Now you don't need to use L at every answer, or it gets a bit monotonous if you keep. And the learning that I took away from that scenario was, so you want to just use it maybe every second or third question. But write your stories down against that framework so you can write them brief. So for instance, if you were saying, opening it with, you might say something like, well, 12 months ago, when I was working at Westpac, I was working in the risk team. So I was put in charge of a project that was actually merging 2 departments together across 2 states. So what I did to get this going was, and then you talk about a few of the things that you did, and who you were involved with, and then that's your actions. And then the result of that was, it took about 6 months to actually get it all implemented, but the result of that was a successful amalgamation of the 2 business units. And ultimately we used that process to replicate in another area of the business because it was so successful. So you're talking through what it was, what action you took, and what the result was. If I was putting an L on the end of that story, a learning, I might say something like, and to be honest, personally, a key learning I took away from that was to make sure that I get all stakeholders on board from the very beginning, because there was a few issues with 1 or 2 of them not getting on board quick enough. So, if I was doing it all again, I would make sure that I had very clear communication.
Yeah.
And we actually spoke each week. So STAR is similar. It's just, I tend to find people get a bit confused sometimes with the STAR. So for me, I say, think about car, driving a car. Yeah? Context or challenge, action, result, and then relate it back to what I've used as examples. So if you're seeing change management in the job spec, think about one when you've been involved in change management. Think about a communication one. Often you can use the stories for different things. Yeah, so you can slot them into as answers to different questions. Remember to say I and not we.
Yes.
Yeah. And each story 2 minutes or less, no longer than that.
Yeah.
Right? But these are so important. It's, again, you must prepare for these. Very few people, and I've been a career coach for 9 years now and a recruiter before that, very few people can answer questions like this without preparation and practice. What they tend to do is talk theory, and that's not what people want to hear.
No, they don't. They want to know what you did.
Exactly. And the reason that they're asked is because what you've done in the past is a reflection of what you could do in the future. So in other words, if you've done it before, you'll do it again for them. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so you're reassuring them that you can do it, not just that you've swallowed a management book and you're talking a lot of theory. So have between 3 and 5 stories and pick out, as I said, the key things in the job advert or the job description. You know, hopefully if you've got an interview, you've got a full job description. And there'll be questions like this. Can you tell me about a time? Can you explain? Can you describe? When people start asking you things like that, they want a story about you. Now, I'm looking, it looks like there might be a few questions. Is there any that?
Well, there's one here. It says, after a toxic environment, I need to ensure a positive culture in my next workplace. What questions would you ask and when?
So you would ask this at the end. Yeah, so we'll get to that slide in a bit, but that's a really good question and it's super important. I've been working with a lady recently, same thing, very toxic environment. So yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but ultimately you want to be able to ask a lot about the culture and a lot about the team and also how they've been there and what they do, you know, for celebrations, things like that as well. That's quite a common scenario. But yeah, I'd say with the behavioural, with the stories, again, it's all about preparation. I know I keep going back to it, but it really is all about preparation. I mean, I've had people over the years that say, look, I have 3 stories that I know really well, and I use them for everything. And I'm like, good. Yeah, if that's what works for you and these stories can adapt, that's perfect. That's perfect. Yeah. There'll always be questions around teamwork. There'll always be questions around communication and dealing with different stakeholders, problems or change management, or how have you managed change. There'll always be questions like that in most interviews. So think about your examples in advance so that you know them really well, and then write them down in short form using that framework. So Carl, as I said, is challenge or context, action, result, L is for learning, STAR is situation, task, action, result. So essentially they're the same thing, really. I just personally find people like the idea of the CAR thing. They can remember it a lot easier as well.
Sorry. I was going to say, there's a question, is there anything specific or different to keep in mind if the interview is for a government organisation? I think it's more important to have your stories ready.
It's more important, yeah. For government organisations, 100% interview like this. Okay, that is their format, and everything that they do is based on their selection criteria. So there's about 34, 36 of them or whatever. So every time they put a job advert together and the interview, it's kind of like a requirement that they use their selection criteria, and everything like that will be behavioural based interview.
Yeah. No? It's so probably easier because you know what the selection criteria is before you go in there.
You do, yeah, you do. So
to prepare, I mean.
How to interview against selection criteria. They'll have selected key ones, and in a way, the questions, it's a lot more straightforward, to be honest, as to, you know, what they're going to ask. But when you do think about your stories, focus on the last 5 to 7 years, 10 years at the most. Don't talk about things from maybe 20 years ago, or people want to know what you've been doing more recently because they'll see that as more relevant to them as well. But as I said, everything that you're doing, think about the job advert, think about that company and what their needs are, okay? And then how your answer will fit that so that they're like, oh gosh, you know, she's done business transformation project or change management or whatever 2 years ago. That's fantastic. She could do that for us because she's done it. Like, that's why people ask it. Yeah. So practice 2 minutes or less, no longer than that. You know, if you feel you've answered it and you get to the end and they're all sort of sitting like this and you think, oh geez, you can always say, have I given enough detail? Or do you want me to give a bit more detail? Or do you want me to give another example? Only say that if you have another example to give, by the way. Don't say that if you don't. But you can, you know, you can always say, do you want a bit more detail? And if they say to you, yeah, can you just tell me a little bit more about how you particularly got that Melbourne office on board? Then again, keeping it to 2 minutes. Don't then waffle on, you know, and lose it. But most of the time people will say, no, that was great, Angela. Yeah, thanks. We'll move on to the next question. So it's the self-awareness that you're bringing into the interview as well.
Yeah, and they just want to validate that they're making the right decision.
Exactly. So you know, all about preparation. So that's an example. I just wanted to sort of throw in an example there so you know what I mean. But most companies nowadays will behavioural interview or competency-based interview, and whatever you want to call it. It's essentially the same thing. And then online job interviews, obviously we spoke a little bit about this at the beginning. The main thing with it, and you know what I find now, is everybody's pretty good with it now. Because I think at the beginning when COVID first hit, I would see a lot of floating heads. I would see a lot of, it was very dark.
Or this. Or
the internet connection was dropping in and out, all that stuff. I wouldn't see that very often now. So most of us have got pretty comfortable with doing it. But as someone asked earlier about how you would dress, you dress as if you're in, or certainly your top half, dress as if you're in a normal interview. Yeah, definitely. Position yourself. I mean, mine is a virtual background, but position yourself with a clear background or virtual. If you know, if you can't have a clear, uncluttered background, closed doors. I had a lady last year when COVID was, you know, full steam, that she was doing well in an interview, had left her door open, and her dog, which was a little dog, jumped up on her lap and knocked her laptop over. She freaked out, and the interview just went.
No.
Yeah, she was really upset. But you know, easily done. Yeah, easily done. So, so just take all of that away from it, really. But you're still going to be preparing as normal. And the good thing with online interviews that can work in everyone's favour, and I'm sitting here like this now, is you can have a lot of notes here, yeah, or post-its stuck to the monitor that you can just sort of be doing that when people are saying, to prompt you and remind you and keep yourself on track. So there's a lot of benefits to the online interviews, to be honest. You can obviously have your resume. You know, it's fine to take notes into a normal interview anyway, but you wouldn't have a big pile of post-it notes, say. But a lot of people will have them stuck around, even if it's to say, remember to say I and not we. Little things like that. Well. So yeah, and just test your sound, test your camera, all the usual stuff, to be honest. And then we're getting towards the end of the interview. So most interviews are between about 40 minutes and an hour. Yeah. So when you get to the end of the interview and they say, thanks, Angela, it's been good to meet you today. Did you have any questions you would like to ask us? Always say yes. Don't say no. Someone said to me recently, should I just say no? I said no. At the very least, ask about the culture, you know. So a really nice one that a lot of people like is just, what are the key goals for this role in the first 3 to 6 months? Don't say what are the challenges, because that can sound a little bit negative. I had someone do that recently. I wouldn't frame it like that. What are the key goals? So in other words, if I come into
where are we heading?
Exactly. What do you want to achieve? People really like that question. It's a very inoffensive question, and it gives them a chance to talk as well about the role.
And you'll understand their vision too.
Exactly. How would you describe the team culture or the company culture? So the lady earlier that mentioned about toxic work environment, I would definitely be doing your research. You know what, as well, it's always worth doing your research on, like, I know there's websites like Glassdoor where you can check out what a company is all about. They tend to be full of quite a lot of negative comments, so I take them with a bit of a pinch of salt. But I would encourage you to even speak to people within your network that know people that work there or have worked there, so that you're getting a really broad opinion.
Yeah, I get phone calls all the time asking about insight into organizations and cultures and people. So yeah, their reputations do precede them.
They do. And I mean, the thing is, people would never sit there and say, oh, you know, we have a bad culture. Like, no. Nobody likes each other here. Well, nobody's going to say that. Yeah. Oh, so you've got to just do your own research and have a look and see how long people have been there. If you're being interviewed somewhere where you can see no one stays beyond 12 months, there's usually a reason for that. So again, do you want to work for someone like that has a revolving door of people Most people say no. Yeah. So it's doing your own research, making sure that you ask people that you know, that they might know. And I mean, again, that's where LinkedIn is really powerful. Get on LinkedIn and have a bit of a look around and see what's been going on with them and stuff. Because what's one person's perfect culture might be someone else's imperfect culture, because we're all different. Yeah. So you've got to find out what works for you. And again, the questions like, where would you see the role in 3 years, or how do you measure performance, are pretty good ones. I would usually say maybe by the end of the interview, when they say, do you have any questions for us, I would normally ask 2. I wouldn't sit there with, I mean, I had someone recently where I had about 5 and he wanted to ask all of them, and I was like, no, that's too many. You can always ask them at second interview.
Yeah.
Or you can ask the recruiter, if you're going through a recruiter, to find out a little bit more, but don't look like you're then totally interviewing them. Yeah. For all it's a conversation, they're still the interviewers. So
yeah, and I think that I really like the goals for the first 3 to 6 months, because it gives you a really good insight into their vision and what they're placing importance on. I really like the culture questions. And then I think even with the measure performance and leadership style, I think they're really good second interview questions, because sometimes you do go into the second interview and you think you know enough now. Like, what can I ask at the end? I think they're good ones for the second.
Yeah, definitely. And then, asking a little bit, if your boss is interviewing you, asking a little bit about what's their leadership style. In other words, how will they manage you? Because that is so important. People tend to leave businesses because of leaders, or lack of leadership.
Yeah.
So asking about that and getting a bit of a feel for how they operate. I mean, I had a client once, quite a senior lady actually, and she reported straight into the CEO. But she was a real open door policy. Okay, she had her own office, he had his own office. She would be the type of person that would wander up, stand in his doorway and say, Alan, have you got a minute? I just wanted to ask you about X, Y, Z. And every time she did it, he would say, Angela, just get Anna, his EA, to put it in the calendar, and we'll catch up for 5 minutes later today or tomorrow or whenever. It drove her nuts. Yeah, she had no idea. She quit the job primarily because of that. She liked him, but he would not change. His old-fashioned leadership style was that everything was put in the calendar through his EA. It was all very formal.
Yeah,
that didn't work for her. Yeah, so
no.
It'll
also raise any flags that you need to see about culture as well with that leadership style question. Because if it's around, if you value flexibility and your leader doesn't, it's not going to work.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think at the minute, with everyone still primarily working from home and some going into the office now, again, it's what's the policy going forward on that? Because what you don't want to do is get offered something that at the minute they're saying, only 2 days a week in the office, but then from July 1st, it's 5 days a week in the office. And you live in Gosford and they're in the city and you've never envisaged that. So asking stuff like that is totally fine, So
we had a question here saying, where is there an ideal number of questions you can ask? But you already answered that, saying
I'd say a couple. 2. Yeah, 2, maybe 3 at the most. But I just wouldn't have a huge list. Certainly not at first interview. Not at first interview, because hopefully you'll get a second and sometimes a third. I mean, I've had someone recently that's had six interviews, believe it or not. Like, geez, that's pretty full on. But
6 interviews.
I know, pretty full on. Yeah, that's a very indecisive company, I think. But anyway, so yeah.
Again, that's a culture flag.
That's what I say to her.
Trying to get something through.
I know. There's a lot of other reasons for having 6 interviews, but most companies will have 2, maybe 3, but most will have 2. So you can save that for further down the track. And also, if you get to job offer and there is things that you want clarification on, it's absolutely fine to get clarification on them. Never say yes to a job offer and then 2 weeks later think, I never knew I was meant to start every day at 8 o'clock. I never made that clear. Yeah, you want to make sure everything is clear and what the expectations are before you take any job offer, to be honest.
Absolutely.
And obviously working with a good recruiter like Emma, they'll help you with all that. Yeah, they'll help guide you through all that. That's what they do basically. So that's, you know, working with a recruiter can be super helpful for all these sort of things.
It can. Hang on, just one more question. Is moving hands around during the online interview acceptable? I do tend to use my hands a lot during interviews. Probably that could come across as annoying.
Yeah,
not
that's
sure
such
though.
a good question actually, because I do this, as you can, all the time, okay? And so I totally relate to where you're coming from. I'm very expressive with my hands. I'd say just being aware of it. So, you know, I'm doing it now, but my hands, I don't think.
Yeah, and so maybe not talking like this.
Yeah, but if you're constantly doing this, especially on an online interview, I agree, it can be a little bit annoying. So just be, I'd say when you've got the online interview or any interview, if you're sitting at the table, and ideally you will, have your hands just placed in front of you, just loosely, sort of cupped in front of you, and make sure you're sitting upright and comfortable. And if every now and again you do a little bit of that, it's fine. But that constant newsreader type thing, the same as this, you know, when people are, but you know, there's such a fine line, isn't there? Because you want to be yourself. You don't want to look like
robot.
Like some really, yeah. I mean, people don't engage with that. And you could, to be honest, you could give the best answers ever, but if you're looking like, you know, stiff and informal and not engaging, they're not going to hire you, because again, when they're interviewing you, they're judging you on you as well. So online interviews, yeah, it can be that little bit harder with that, to be completely honest. But the main thing I'd say is, like Emma and I are today, have the camera or the laptop pushed enough away from you that you can be sitting like this, and you're not, you know, too close or anything.
I just think this one's funny. It makes me laugh.
Yeah, but like I think, have your own camera on so you can see yourself.
Even practice in front of the camera. Open Google Meet or something. Yeah, and just practice.
Yeah. Have Zoom's perfect for that, and just see how you look, you know. Yeah, really, really important not to just rock up and assume everything's going to be okay. Don't do an interview on your mobile phone if you can help it as well. I had someone this week that I was coaching with, and he's on his phone and it's moving around everywhere.
Yeah, that's terrible.
Like, it was so off-putting. It really was. So don't be in a room, doors closed, everything is fixed and not moving, and you're literally feeling like you're in front of them. Yeah, yes. But test the sound. Again, this guy never had any sound on. Test the sound, test the camera, so that you're totally comfortable. Click, it's on, and then you're sitting talking like we are now, as if you're in the room. That's the idea. Then you'll feel relaxed, and you know, you won't be doing this and worrying about different buttons and all that stuff. So yeah.
And
so
you can turn your and especially with Zoom, you can turn it off so you can't see yourself as well. So you know, you can see the interviewer, and I do actually recommend that.
Yeah, because it can be a bit weird looking constantly, like I am at the minute, looking constantly at yourself.
It's because I said it.
Most of the time I do a lot of group workshop training on Zoom, and I always minimize, to be honest, I minimize everyone. I can't see myself and I can't see them, because it's just a distraction, in all honesty.
Yeah.
So you don't want to be thinking what you're doing. So then at the end of the interview, it's absolutely fine to say at the end, you know, thanks so much. I've really enjoyed meeting you today. What's the next step? And just let them talk. Yeah. So when will you expect to hear back? Obviously, if you're going through a recruiter like Emma, they'll do all that for you. Yes, it's a lot easier. So if you've gone through a recruiter, once you've finished, call your recruiter, let them know how it went, give them the feedback. If you're going to the company directly, not through a recruitment agent, what I always recommend is when you get home that night, send them a really brief email to the person who organized the interview. Ideally, not all of them, just the person who organized it. And then just say thanks. So, you know, hi, Angela, thanks so much for your time today. It was great to meet you. Just to reconfirm, I am very interested in the marketing manager role with ABC Company, and I look forward to hearing back from you next week as discussed. Kind regards, Angela. Farmeary, mobile number underneath. So short and sweet. Always do that, but not if you're going to a recruiter. Okay, the recruiter will do that on your behalf. This is just if you're going direct to the company. Always send a brief email to the organizer only. Again, I get asked a lot, should I then connect with them on LinkedIn, Angela? What's your thoughts on that, Emma? If they've not got the job, but just have an
No, please don't.
Yeah. No, I say the same. So don't.
Not straight away. It can be pretty off-putting. Yeah,
really awkward. So don't. It's fine to check them out, check their profile.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think once the process is done, if it's done in a nice way and it's to stay in touch and about networks and things like that, that's fine. But no, not straight away.
Exactly. So if you are unsuccessful and you're given, you're told, sorry, Angela, you were unsuccessful, we've gone with someone else, then leave it a week or so and you can reach out to the people that you met and say, it was good to meet you recently. Best of luck with the new person in the role. It would be good to connect with you. So put a little note in there. Don't just send them a random connection request on LinkedIn. And then again, you never know when you might see them in the future.
Yeah. And even if you did enjoy the process, say that you did enjoy the process.
Yeah. Exactly. So I always just feel you do unto others as you want done unto you. Leave a good impression of yourself as well. It's, Australia, each city is a fairly small city, and you see people over and over again. So yeah, I just think, as I say, do unto others as you want done unto yourself, and it makes it a lot easier. If they say, look, we'll let you know next week. Say you've had the interview today, or we'll let you know by the end of next week. If it gets to the end of next week and you've not heard back, especially if it's direct, it's fine to follow up. Yeah, and just say, hey, I'm just following up from my interview on this date. I know you said I'd hear this week. It would be great to just see where you're up to with it. I recommend doing that a couple of times and phoning them as well. If they've said they'll let you know and they don't, then yeah, I would definitely recommend doing it. I know a lot of people will ghost people.
No, I hate it.
It's awful. But yeah, again, as I said before, do unto others as you want done unto yourself. So I just think keep going with it. A couple of times and a phone call, and then it's their loss. If they're, not respectful enough to give you that feedback, it's their loss.
And then you definitely know about the culture.
Exactly. Yeah. You then, I would say, really, is that somewhere that you would want to work? Probably not. To be completely honest. Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, I see that all the time. All the time. It's very common. Clients will say they would hear back, Angela, 3 weeks have gone by. I say, okay, what have you done? What do you mean, what have I done? Well, have you followed up? Well, no, they said they would get in touch with me. Okay, well, how about you get in touch with them? Yeah, it's fine to follow up. It's fine to
and it's terrible. And sometimes things do go on hold as well. Like roles do go on hold. So it might not necessarily mean that you don't have the role, but yeah, it's still, definitely follow up.
Lady I was working with this week who was meant to have an interview recently, it was cancelled at pretty short notice because the CEO had resigned.
Right.
She was reporting into him. So she would have been one of his direct reports, but the CEO had resigned. So the role still existed, but nothing was going to happen with it until they'd replaced their CEO. And then that role would reactivate, and she potentially, if she was still available, would get that interview. So lots of different things happen, So never just assume if you don't hear back, it's because they thought you were rubbish. That's not the case, but you don't know.
No, something could have happened.
And if you are unsuccessful, try and get feedback. Just ask. Most of the time they'll give. Well, sometimes they'll give it. Often they won't. But unless you ask, you're never going to know. So you can just say.
Yeah, it's always good to try and get something constructive.
Yeah. Now, I'm conscious we're coming to the end, and is there a few questions down there?
There's another question here, is when is it a good time to ask about salary if you're applying directly and it's not advertised in the job advert? God, I wish it was advertised in every job advert.
No, it's a really good question, actually. Because, I've had a client recently who was asked by a recruiter, actually, about a role that she applied for. And the process was going ahead, but then he hadn't asked her about salary. She hadn't asked about salary, and she realised she was about 50k over what they were looking to pay. So I think if you're going through a recruiter, find out early on what's the salary that they'll look to pay, because you don't want to go down the route if you're too expensive. But equally, the flip side of that is, say you're on 90k and you realise later they'd have paid 120. You don't want
exactly. So it's like it's what the role's worth, and if they're if you're 50K over, it's probably not the right role for you anyway, because it says, like, it talks about a lot of different things. It might not be big enough for you. It could be the wrong culture. They're underpaying their employees. There's so many different aspects to that.
Yeah. So and really, if you're unsure, if you're applying and it is, then do your research on Google with salary surveys. I mean, Hayes have a really good salary survey that they've had for years and update every year. So there's a lot of information there, because you do. I work with a lot of people that have been with the one company a long time. Okay, so their salaries when they come out of there may be quite high compared to what the market is paying.
True.
So for them, they often have to take a bit of a step back in salary. So it's kind of like you need to recalibrate, is my salary at the right level? You know, or have I been not overpaid, but paid very well because I've been with that one company a long time? So I would ask the recruiter upfront very early on what the salary is. If you're going direct, I would be asking the person that's organising the role, to be honest with you, just to make sure. They should be asking you, in all honesty. You know, they're not going to want to waste their time either. So I would say, I wouldn't do it at interview. I never recommend somebody sits there and says, can I just ask you what the salary is? So that's a bit of an uncomfortable conversation. But before you get into the interview process, I would be finding out before you start what their salary, and ask for a range. What's your range? What are you looking to pay? Rather than pinning yourself, I'm looking for 90K, you could say I'm looking for between 90 and 110 base plus super. Make that clear, or people will assume it's package. And then just say, how does that fit within your budget? How does that fit within your range? If they then say, oh, that's a bit high, you can say, oh, okay, what are you looking to pay? And then they might say, well, actually, the maximum we could pay is 70. Then you're going to take yourself out of it. If they say, look, the maximum we could pay is about 85 to 87, then maybe you would look at that. So I'll put it back on them and find out what their budget is as well. But do it before you go for interview.
Absolutely.
Don't wait to the very end and you're getting an offer and they offer you 90 and you wanted 130. You need to get that conversation early on in the piece to keep it real, essentially.
Yeah, and someone's made a valid point. An interview can be difficult if peer roles are in the interview as well.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, I think for me with salary, early on in the conversation is really important, but not in the actual interview, unless they say at the end. So what, in terms of salary, what are you looking for? Give a range, as I just said, but always with that range. If you're looking for, you don't want to look any less than 90, but you're ideally looking 100, 110, say 90 to 110. Don't say 70 to 90, because they may offer you 70. And if that's not what you want, you don't want to underprice yourself. That's very important. So,
and if you've been represented by a recruiter and they've talked to you about the salary, I would definitely recommend saying to them, making sure you clarify with the recruiter how much they put you forward for. Because if an interviewer asks you in an interview, how much are you looking for, and you put the bottom of your range and they've put you at, say, a little bit above that, then you're gonna, it makes everyone look just a wee bit silly.
Yeah, which is why if you're going through a recruiter like Emma or the guys at Sterling, they'll do all that for you. They'll be very direct in what you're looking for, and you know, the recruiter will know how far the client can go in terms of the money. So if you're telling the recruiter, look, I'm looking 120, and the recruiter knows they can only go to 100, probably the recruiter's not going to put you forward. So, you know, you've just got to work that all out very early on, so that you're not wasting your time or theirs and getting frustrated by that, because that's not good for anyone.
And there's another question. So since this is my first job in Australia, I'm kind of struggling to ascertain how much pay I should target. Does that matter, or is it strictly role-based and experience? To that person, you are more than welcome to give me a call afterwards if you want some advice. I've got a lot of different types of salary surveys, and if you want me to help you with that, I can. I will put down my email address there too, just in case you don't have it.
Perfect.
But you're more than welcome to get in touch.
Excellent. Okay, so for some reason my the slides are not working now. know what that's all about. Oh, there you go. Okay. The arrows are not working. How weird. Huh. How strange. Let me just get that. Oh, hold on, guys.
Has anyone got any other questions they want to ask while
pretty
we've
much
got Angie?
it was final slide, in all honesty.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Let me just see if I can. Why that's done that. No idea why it's done it, to be honest, but it was pretty much final slide. So let me just go stop share. So then it's just you and I. There's a little bit nicer. But yeah, I think just to sort of reconfirm what we were saying, the preparation and research before it is so important. Make sure that you know who you're meeting, everything else, what style of interview it is, and then getting your stories prepared again, so that when you do get the behavioural based interview questions, you're really comfortable with what you're going to be saying. Yeah, but it is all about practice. As I said, even people that are interviewers and do it a lot, unless you practice, you can freeze on the day, and no one wants to be doing that, in all honesty. So just preparing in advance so that you know what's going on. Oh, good to see you there, Phil, as well.
You
So
said hi.
Anybody got any final questions before we finish off? So feel free, by the way, to connect with me on LinkedIn as well. I am set up as follow on LinkedIn, but if you just click the 3 little dots, you can click through and you'll have the option to connect if you want to send me a connection request. But more than happy to connect with people on LinkedIn if you do want to do that as well and ask any more questions.
Yeah, and I'm here too. So if you need any help with anything, let us know. And thank you so much for attending today. Thank you again, Angela.
You are welcome. You are very welcome. I finally got my final. Very welcome and good to see you all, guys. I have no idea why oh, there you go. It's going.
Ah, there it is.
There, yay.
There
so
you are.
That's me. Yeah, but pretty much.
Thank you, Angela.
Anyway, so yeah, good to see you all, guys, and best of luck with everything as well. And make sure that you research and prepare. It's all about preparation.
All about preparation.
Yeah.